and for those of you who are members and for those of you who are new to us. We have a packed agenda, and I'll be trying to keep all the speeches quite short. And as you can see, we have one of our patrons, Lord Victor Adebayola here, and we have one of our previous directors who will both speak, and Andy, our current director, will close this evening. But I want to talk to you a bit about why I joined ROTA and why I remained with ROTA for the last decade. I joined ROTA because everything ROTA stands for, I stand for personally. Every cause it defends me and my own rights. As a Somali refugee who is in the society, often facing lots of barriers and discrimination. All the work as ROTA has done is part of who I am, part of the communities I am from, and totally kind of speaks to me on a very personal level. So I joined to fight racism and xenophobia in all its manifestations, to work with our partners across all other equality strands, to ensure that the human rights of everybody is respected. ROTA from the very beginning, when I was, shall I say, headhunted in 2006, and was astonishing because although I worked in the volunteer sector, I've never worked for an organization that enables people the way ROTA does. When I joined, Carleen Freeman, who many of you know as Dr. Carleen now, was a volunteer administrator. Within no time, she excelled, and we all know her history and her career and how that developed in front of our very eyes. ROTA enables many other people in this room. Just tonight, I was asking Aya, who was a volunteer with us and now one member of the staff, and Elena, who have remained committed to the organization for a number of years as a volunteer, why are they here? Why not bigger charities? Why not Amnesty International? What is it that ROTA gives them? And ROTA actually gives them a lot, they tell me. It enables them. It allows them not to be just in one silo, but to work right across the organization, to develop personal skills, to develop networks and relationships. It's that kind of approach, thanks to our directors and other staff, that actually makes us strong. Many of our sister organizations, much bigger than us, are either under today or are about to be under. Yes, we face very difficult times, that's true. But without our staff and volunteers, actually we wouldn't be here today. Those people, I can report, and I have often done so in public forums, have actually taken salary sacrifice to stay and remain in the organization, to continue to deliver this area of work. So I would like to start with applauding all of them and thanking them very, very much for all their efforts. I think we need organizations like ROTA. Yes, a lot of activists have achieved a lot. Many of us have congratulated ourselves in a lot of the cases we worked on, but there is a lot of work to do. Even more so, I would say, in a world where we are told we live in post and truth, in a world where we know Trump exists, we all need to be here. We need to be continuing that fight. Now more than ever, I would say. I'm not going to dwell on that a lot because you will hear from our speakers and we'll touch on all of those issues and as we progress towards the evening. So I'm going to hand you over to our main speaker, Lord Victor Adebayola, to speak to us tonight. And his speech will be really covering the last 20 years, if you like, from Stephen Lawrence to Granville. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And the first thing I should say is that my speech isn't going to take 20 years to deliver. I'm going to try and get it done in 20 minutes, actually, if I can. First of all, just to congratulate Ali and ROTA for basically sticking with it for 20 years. It's not easy, and I'm very proud to be associated with you, and I'm very proud that you asked me to be a patron. You're doing a fantastic job. What a week! What a week! I mean, apart from the fact that it's the coldest week I've ever experienced, people say that it's going to be colder next week. What a week! You know, we started the week literally in 2 days. We've had the first black member of the, well, I know people are saying she's mixed, she's black, right? Member of the royal family. And then literally the day after, we have Trump. I mean, pinch me. Which nightmare am I living in? It's unbelievable, unbelievable. And what it illustrates, actually, is that change is not linear. You know, things happen in the most bizarre ups and downs, and it's very difficult, and it's getting increasingly difficult to understand where you are in the trajectory of social and political change. These things happen, and they all have meaning. But the thing about ROTA is that for the last 20 years, we, I guess, have been fighting to bring the issues that impact on black and minority ethnic people into focus, and working to reduce hate speech online and in force, in physical force, researching young girls in gangs. You mentioned Carleen Furman. I remember Dr. Furman very, very well. She's done amazing work. Equipping the third sector with comprehensive understanding of the Equality Act. But I know that we have faced roadblocks from successive governments, and I've seen more race reviews than I've listened to Stevie Wonder albums. And I like Stevie Wonder. You know, these things happen. But the question is the arc of race equality bending towards justice overall? You know, can we say it's bending towards justice overall? And it's actually hard to say. When we were talking about what I was going to say this evening, we were discussing, me and Andy, you know, the kind of speech I wanted to give, and I wanted to put some facts into it, something that gave us a chance to actually reflect on the last 20 years or so. In 2009, 10 years on from the Stephen Lawrence inquiry, there was an Ipsos Mori poll for the Equality and Human Rights Commission that showed, as a country, we're more at ease with ourselves than ever before. A nation where nearly half of its citizens were optimistic that Britain could be more tolerant in 10 years' time. Back then, 58% of ethnic minorities were optimistic about the future. What we need to ask is, would 58% of ethnic minorities say the same today? I'm not sure. I doubt it, actually. Now our reality is quite different. We've fought hard, we've won many battles: Scarman, Macpherson, institutionalised racism, Four Race Relations Act, an Equality Act, samosas, saris, steel bands, of course. These achievements are responsible for irrevocable change. There's no going back on some of them, that have at least I think so, that have redefined us as a country, and inked protections against racial discrimination permanently, we hope, into the statute books. We've seen many symbolic shifts. I mean, whatever you think of the royal wedding, I think 15, 20 years ago it would be unheard of. Those of you that are old enough will remember the brief flirtation with Prince Charles and the 3 degrees, you remember that? And the horror that ripped through the country. Right, he was only stood next to them for 10 minutes. It nearly caused a revolution. Is he gonna marry a 3 degree? Remember all that? Unbelievable. He danced with them, 10 seconds. Now we've got a prince marrying a black woman. That'd be unheard of. These are symbolic shifts, but not necessarily of where we had the opinion change we needed to see. We rejoiced that 7% of people said they would be comfortable for their children to choose a partner of a different race or faith in 2009, up from 22% only 7 years before. Britain had reflected and grown up. If these symbols served as fact of the post-racial society, then our post-Brexit, Trump-tweeting world epitomises that this was in fact illusory. So how did we get here? We didn't win hearts and minds. Research by Nat Sen and the Runnymede Trust this year, and congratulations Runnymede Trust for actually sticking with it too, because at one point it was looking pretty tricky. So well done to you too. Research by the Runnymede Trust this year found that 1 in 4 people self-define as very or a little prejudiced towards people of other races. It has not fallen below this level since 1987, when the question was added to the British Social Attitude Survey. So Jack Straw, commenting in 2013 on the legacy of racist, unprovoked murder of Stephen Lawrence and the Macpherson inquiry that followed, said, "The pervasive open racism of the 50s and 60s, the pernicious sniggering racism of the 70s, 80s and 90s is gone." He was overly optimistic. The tireless campaigning of Doreen Lawrence and the impact of the inquiry changed the way we as a nation think about ourselves. But whilst we increased the sanctions for overt racism, we didn't replace the old ways of thinking with new inclusive ones. We can really see this when we look at Brexit and hate crime. Hate crime was steadily decreasing in the 10 years following Macpherson, but increased in 2005 in response to migration from Eastern Europe. Since Brexit, we've seen the largest increase in hate crimes since records began. Brexit gave symbolic permission to racists and xenophobes to commit public attacks on and offline. But the sentiments have festered persistently. ROTA's prison project that worked with schools to challenge hate speech online is more relevant than ever. Without opinion change, we can only tinker around the edges. People and institutions find new, more insidious ways to exert racism and enact their biases. Pernicious racism certainly remains. So inequality in the labour market has remained. Destructive rhetoric against migrants and refugees has remained. Hate has become more inclusive, with targets of all shades, and nowhere is this seen more keenly than in the criminal justice system. From Stephen Lawrence to the Lammy Review, the disgraceful murder of Stephen Lawrence and the scandalous treatment of the investigation and family by police officers appalled people up and down the country. And the first inquiry that followed forced a seismic shift that shook the Met. One of its most enduring legacies, the term institutional racism, confirmed and legitimised what we had known all along. Finally, we had a term that explained how racist ideas and biases became embedded in the institutions meant to serve and protect us. It spawned new HR positions and the monitoring of representation and progression in the public sector. But it's a term still not properly understood. Only the police were tarred with the term middle class England and the institutions so associated with it. The courts, the judiciary, the civil service, the BBC, the NHS did not have to do the soul searching that the Met were reluctantly forced to do, and ordinary individuals were let off the hook. Only institutions and violent thugs were racist now. The inquiry called for stop and search to be effective and fair. It said that increasing trust and confidence must be a ministerial priority. In 1993, when Stephen Lawrence was murdered, a black person was 5 times more likely to be stopped and searched on the beat. Earlier this month, stopwatch analysis of new data released by the Home Office found black people are now 8 times more likely to be stopped and searched than white people. Disproportionately for all black and minority ethnic groups has increased. Now 4 times more likely to be stopped. The numbers of stop and searches have declined for all, but the rate of stops have fallen more for white individuals than black and minority ethnic individuals. Disproportionality is increasing, even as stops go down. As I'm sure we all know, stop and search is not effective at reducing violent crime, and is still not being carried out fairly. As chair of the National Police Improvement Agency in Stop and Search Community Panel that I chaired in 2007, I worked to make stop and search used proportionately and effectively, and government have all the evidence. An HM Inspectorate Constabulary report found that 27% of police records of stop and search did not contain evidence of reasonable grounds for the stop to take place. In 2013, only 9% of stops resulted in an arrest. Researchers repeatedly made clear that negative contact with the police erodes trust with black and minority ethnic communities. So why, in 2017, are we still hearing stop and search mooted by Commissioner Cressida Dick and Amber Rudd as a solution to knife crime? We sent a letter in June to both parties hoping to discuss the proposal. We continue to wait for a reply. This and the funding cut to the Black Police Association is not reassuring black and minority ethnic communities that our concerns are a priority. And disproportionality is a problem endemic to the entire criminal justice system. My independent review into mental health and policing could not help but expose stereotyped attitudes around race, an increased use of restraint on black and minority ethnic people and deaths in custody, despite not featuring in the terms of reference. The recent review by David Lammy also made this clear. Although white, black and Asian people face similar conviction rates for drug offences, the odds of receiving a prison sentence is 240% higher for black and minority ethnic groups. Black people are 4 times more likely to be in prison than white people. Yet, it's promising that governments are committed to implementing Lammy's recommendations as part of the race disparity audit. But if you've been around as long as I have, you become a veteran of reviews, commissions and inquiries. As a sector, we're growing cynical and fatigued. So the race disparity audit, because the inequalities thrown up by the race disparity audit are well known to all of us here, We already know that Black, Caribbean and Roma, Gypsy and traveller peoples are more likely to be permanently excluded than white peoples. ROTA's current work on informal exclusions, which are not officially recorded, is showing us how discrete covert methods are being used to target Black and minority ethnic pupils, in particular to avoid overt discrimination. And the audit revealed that Black, African, Caribbean and Bangladeshi families are less likely to own their own home, living instead on social or privately rented accommodation. Black and minority ethnic people are more likely to live in non-decent homes, while Black, African and Pakistani households are more likely to live in a home with damp problems than white British families. Research by Professor Danny Dorling adds to this unequal housing landscape, finding Black and minority ethnic people in social housing more likely to live in flats. Black and Asian kids make up the majority of children living above the 4th floor of tower blocks, and this hints to direct and indirect discrimination in housing availability and allocation, that when left unchecked can lead to unthinkable tragedy, as we've seen at Grenfell Tower. This devastating fire has cost 80 lives, destroyed livelihoods and traumatised survivors. It has exposed the stark inequality in housing provision in Britain, with Black and minority ethnic groups and migrants bearing the brunt of this injustice. 5 months on, and almost 2/3 of families are still living in emergency accommodation, stuck in hotels and B&Bs, families that have lost everything, having to face Christmas in temporary accommodation. It's shameful. In North Kensington, GPs have logged more than 1,000 Grenfell-related appointments to deal with the mental health needs of those affected. Holding those responsible for this catastrophe, holding them to account is vital. The social makeup of Grenfell is the product of race and class intersecting. As a result, the clear disregard for the safety concerns of residents has a discriminatory outcome. The government is here to serve all of us. But as I mentioned earlier, housing provision is failing Black and minority ethnic people, with discrimination and disproportionality rife. This is an unacceptable breach of European Convention of Human Rights, while we still have them, protections and the public sector equality duty. Legislation is an important lever against discrimination, but it has to have teeth and it has to bite. So, where do we go from here? Government departments have started to put together programmes of work to tackle issues raised by the race disparity audit. Employment and school exclusions are a top priority. We remain hopeful that government will take action across the board as promised. Our job will be to continue to hold their feet to the fire. We need to see the strengthening of the Equality Act, Clause 1. The socio-economic duty must be implemented so that race and class is considered when public services are being provided. The Equality and Human Rights Commission needs adequate funding and powers to hold government to account. We need a positive vision of what our country is and can be. This must be inclusive, multicultural, and not rely on rhetoric that blames and excludes Black and minority ethnic and migrant groups. It must recognise the contribution of all of us to Britain. Now no one can hide from the inexcusable inequalities and unfair treatment of Black and minority ethnic people. The experiences that we've had since records began. We need to see targeted programmes to bring these gaps to a close once and for all. The issue here, and the thing that I've learned over 30 years of working in public services and being involved in campaigns of one kind or another, is this. Once you take your eye off the ball, and once you allow the notion of a post-racial society to take hold, you've lost the battle. I'm afraid I need to tell you that the fight continues, and as soon as we stop fighting, the enemy, the racists, have won. We must continue. We must continue. One of the things I'm pleased about, I'm kind of pleased and disappointed in some ways. This is an audience of activists. This is an audience of ordinary people, not MPs or members of House of Lords, members of the audience that represent communities from all over London and all over the country. And it's in our hands that the future of Black and minority ethnic communities lie. I'm with you. I know that you're with ROTA. Thank you very much.
We have a slight change of order of events. I think our poet is not here yet. We're still queuing up, so we'll have Diana will be talking to us about intersectionality of gender and racial discrimination, and also how we work with our partners, our funders, and enable our volunteers.
Or I'll be just tripping over my own chair. First of all, of course, I want to say thank you, Ali, thank you, Andy. It's actually lovely to be invited back to the organisation that I love so much that I'm afraid I'm going to use the term we, even though I don't necessarily work for ROTA anymore. And 20 years is an amazing thing to happen in the political climate that we've got now. So it is wonderful to still see the organisation working, and I can't really believe it has been 20 years, and then I look at my son Max and realise that that amount of time has gone past. I first joined ROTA in 1997 as a policy officer, and then came back in 2000 as the Chief Executive Officer, in 2004. So I have a long history with the organisation, and I've seen the brilliant work that many of the staff have carried out. So from the work of Brian Richardson, who I just saw come in respect of Stephen Lawrence, to Carleen, who we've spoken about so frequently, and her amazing groundbreaking work that some of you helped with on the Women's and Girls Project. And then now we have Active Lives, Healthy Minds, which is a marvellous project working with community groups in developing activities to support the mental health and well-being with the Nepalese, Somali and Tamil people in West London. So much has been achieved, and as I'm already touching on, a lot of that has been in partnership. A lot of that has been down to the experience of the volunteers, the patrons such as Lord Adebowale with their experience in Parliament, Safer, who's been here for 10 years, making sure that everything works behind the scenes as the office manager. And I can see many ex-staff and volunteers who are here because you still care about the organisation. And it was set up after GLARE, Greater London Action on Race Equality, which was set up in 1984. So right from the beginning, ROTA built on the shoulders of those activists and those people who've been fighting for race equality in this country for time immemorial, probably. I mean, we could go back to the Romans. And we could also go back, I believe, was it Queen Charlotte was potentially black? But it was all kept a bit secret.
There's been a few.
Is anybody here a royal watcher and can
Yeah.
Queen Charlotte, yeah. So it was covered up, and as we're saying, it seems to be cyclical because we get some rights and then they try and take them away. We get somewhere in terms of royalty and then they try and pretend it didn't happen. Now, what else did I want to say about ROTA? ROTA has always been inclusive. For us, Black, Asian and minority ethnic as a term did include those who did not have black skin. So we worked with Irish communities, as already been mentioned, the gypsies and travel communities. And I think that has been one of the strong selling points and why the organisation has survived. I also think it's always punched above its weight. It's tiny, it has a small team, sometimes 4 or 5 staff, the volunteers, the trustees, everybody working together have made a difference to it. Camille Lozano, one of our ex-chairs who can't be here tonight, did amazing work. Dr. Robert Stone, I believe, is on the video that we're showing tonight. These people have all contributed to the work going forward. And I think we do live in a current climate where race equality is not necessarily at the top of this government's agenda. And over the last 10 years, perhaps we've seen the fragility of some of our hard-won changes. And as Victor rightly said, we do have to carry on fighting because otherwise those can be stripped away. In terms of the partners we worked with, I've seen people here from Trust for London, City Bridge Trust. Funders have always been key to understanding how ROTA works, and their support enables the projects to go on. So at the moment, I think it's the big lottery is funding the London, City Bridge Trust, are all partners with us. And we've always had an open and good relationship with them, being able to discuss our projects as they develop to make sure they are actually meeting the needs of the black voluntary sector on the ground and the communities which we serve. The other people who've been important to us are the policymakers. We've worked both at a local level, at the regional level, the national level. Annette from the GLA, we worked on sustainability a few years ago. There are all these partnerships that are key in how ROTA does its work and why I think it's survived for 20 years. One of the projects I'm most proud of is a project called HERE. It was a network set up across the equalities organisations. Lisa Greensil's on the board, she's here tonight. And I do believe I saw Christine, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Hey.
I'm far, we have 2 strong, we are not 1.
Oh, excellent. I'm very pleased to hear that. HERE was set up to make sure we were ahead of the curve as the new Equalities Act was being put in place. And it's about us all working together. Now for me, as a working class black feminist, it might seem obvious why intersectionality is important. But I think it's also self-evident that people who discriminate against one group, such as Asian people, are likely to discriminate against another group, such as gay men. So if we find a way to work together, then we have more strength than if we work in isolation. And I think with that, it's also important to remember that just because one belongs to a certain group, you don't necessarily understand the issues that other groups are facing. And I have to hold my hands up and say, as a bit of an old feminist, I didn't really get gay marriage. Didn't see what the point was. Why would you fight for an institution like that? But it was one of my lesbian friends who explained to me about being excluded from hospital appointments, from being excluded financially, about not being able to share your partner's life in the way that you wanted to, both in law and in love. And I became a convert. So we have to listen to the voices of lived experience. We have to understand that it's the people who are facing whatever issue it is daily, and it is their voices that need to be heard. ROTA has always been there to ensure that the black, Asian and minority ethnic communities' voices can be heard in influencing policy. Again, as a black woman, I'm sure that every woman in this room has had an occasion where they've been mansplained, or they've been talked over, or they've made a point and then conveniently the man next to them has made it and they've been heard. So we need to be aware within our own organisations that we are hearing all the black voices. We need to hear the LGBT voices, we need to hear the disabled voices, we need to hear the women's voices when we're talking about the black voluntary and community sector. Part of the reason I said that was because I think going forward we're going to have to hang on to this. There are some brilliant generic organisations out there. I worked for London Voluntary Service Council, which is sadly no more, but it understood and took on board that it needed to work with organisations representing different groups of people rather than trying to represent it as a whole. As funding gets tighter and more difficult, we are going to have to fight to ensure that black, Asian and minority ethnic organisations get the funding they need, because as I've said, without that funding, those unique voices will not be able to shape policy. When I was writing this speech as well, I just had a quick look at some stats, so I just wanted to finish with a few there. Following on from what Victor was saying about the criminal justice system, I thought I'd found some good news. Do you know what percentage of police officers in the Met are now from black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds? No ROTA policy officers are allowed to say anything. Anybody got any ideas?
23%.
23. You're an ex-policy officer, I believe, but I'll let you off on that one. It's not quite that good. It's 13.4%. Now that, I thought, well, that's a bit better than it was when I looked at my old stats back from 2005 when it was 5.5%. So hurrah! Things are getting better. We've got more black police officers on the beat. Except, what percentage of London's population do you think are from a black, Asian, minority ethnic background?
14.
Yes, you see, you got that one right. 40%. So 14% isn't very good when we're looking at the 40%, is it? And then if you go up, and we all know about ceilings and glass ceilings, it really doesn't look so good. because if we're looking at Chief Inspector and above, it's only 5.7% of officers from a black, Asian and minority ethnic background. So when we come to what was being spoken about in terms of stop and search and being 8 times more likely to be stopped and searched, then we're obviously not winning the battle and there is much more to be done. And if we look at our young people, because again, looking to the future, 12,000 young Londoners from a black, Asian and minority ethnic background are currently in custody. This is an horrific figure, but it's even more horrific if you realise that that is 49% of the children and young people in our capital city that are in custody. And back in 2005, it was only 25%. So for every gain that we make, there are people out there who are quite willing institutionally and personally to use their racism to oppress us. Right, so having cheered us all up with that, I would just like to end by saying that I actually feel really angry at the moment. When I listen to Trump speak, every bit of myself that has learned that you take an evidence-based approach, you talk to people about what we have in common and how we can move things forward to be positive, starts to disintegrate, and I feel like getting up there and slapping him in the face. But I expect that's not the sort of policy that ROTA could engage with. So, I hope for my son and all young people that we will move towards a future where equality is a given and we don't have to fight. But as Victor so eloquently put earlier, if we step back from the fight, that so ain't gonna happen. So here's to the good fight, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. We still don't have our poet for tonight, but Andy and I can talk to you a bit about what we really want of members and potential future members. We would like to increase our membership. Our membership is quite healthy at the moment, but without members actually, ROTA is much weaker than we wanted it to be. What do we want our members to do? We want you to be as active as you can. We accept that life is busy for everybody and hectic. But even if you have a conversation with the person next door, if you challenge an article in the Daily Hate, every little thing helps. Every little person's mindset you change contributes to putting race on the agenda and to a more equal society. So we want you to take a personal responsibility for changing people's attitude and mindsets, particularly around this area, but not only around race, around all other areas of inequality. Because as we've been alluding to, actually people are oppressed, and oppressed because of who they are, not because of what they do and any other thing. So I think those conversations need to continue. Many of us already do it. Many of us have convinced many people and changed mindset. Diana herself just told us how her own view on homosexuality in marriage has changed. And it's that kind of change we want. People don't want change that's imposed on them, that comes as something to be done to them. But the change that we do with people is really important. We also want you to be active if you want and have the time to be active within the organization. But for any one of you who's not a member, there is a membership, it's free to become a member. There's a membership application at the back, so please join us. Some of the areas of work we've now moved into over the last few years is really trying to move the subtle BAME communities to work much closer with recent migrants communities in this country. Those two communities suffer from the same level of inequality and the same prejudices in every sphere of social policy. But often we kind of don't join up. Often some of us actually are misguided and misled by the Daily Hate and the mass media. So some of the work we've been doing through the various projects like Healthy Minds is actually to work right across all communities and bring people much closer together so that we fight this collectively. And that's the other conversation that I want us to take elsewhere. You know, we need to bring refugee communities into this dialogue. Rather than having two separate communities, we need one coherent community that addresses this together, because we are all impacted by it. And the society suffers as a result. And it's well-known fact and well-established that actually economically inequality is not good for society. And those are the kind of conversations we need to continue. I'm going to stop there. Before I hand you over to Andy to close, and our poet is here, and I hope she's ready. I'm not out of breath. I'm freezing. I'm going to hand you over to her. Really sharp.
Hi, good evening. I would pick the night that it's incredibly busy out there to get to here from Peterborough. How are you this evening? It's a real achievement to be here, isn't it? Like on the 20th anniversary. I'm really proud to be performing. Okay, so just to rocking really quickly, I'm going to jump onto my first poem, which is called Black Woman in England. Targeted on the street for hurt by small minds and mocked for trying to do anything above our station. If we want equality, we have to prove we deserve it, though anyone with eyes can see our struggle to live. Why are we still bright, still outspoken, though they try to silence us? Who understands suppression better than the oppressed, so we don't spread distress? We believe in a better you. In me is the jingle of Indian viol, which rings out from the depths of my past, accompanied by the tread of Arabian camels. The rhythm is taken up and set free by an uplifting African drum. This is the beating of my heart. From the shores of Africa, Mother to all humankind, take a little time to be in this remembrance, treating each other in reverence as kin. Black is a hard thing to be, a rose with a thorn. The scorn of international community, we know. Caught in a web of not belonging, but still able to show our beauty, ultimately humane. Together we can stand by what we say, come what may. To gift our pleasure in some way, relinquish leisure for the sake of citizenship. Debate, educate, hope for change. Excuse me. To activate in calm love. From the ordinary to what is perceived absurd, give the whole of your being, not just words. Make a vow of trust together, to send all else away in favour of the ecstasy of lighting someone else's reality with the assurance that they can rely on you doing what you say with the same certainty. Let this be like the universal knowledge that night follows day, to stand by what you say, come what may. This way a person is endowed with faith in you, with thoughts creating valuable purpose, to sculpt channels of change, not trenches of war. If only we could greet need with good vibrations, avoid harmful temptations, signal to a higher wisdom and walk with awareness. If only I could love with my whole being always. If you meet me like this, I'd pick the flowers from my heart to lay at your feet. Thank you. Okay, my next poem is called Progress. It was written around Islamophobia, so I'll just take a deep breath. What does it mean when a true love is torn to shreds in front of your eyes? When children are sold for less than a romantic dinner for two? When good intentions are taken to be something bad? When Allah's words, earnestly spoken, deemed to be utterings of the mad, and yet Even the insane are blessed. There are those who swiftly pursue wealth, passing the fallen, and those who choose to rest their heads in alleyways are human. There are those who bow down to no one but the Almighty, who are standing in clear sight of the world and choose to live honestly, to love as freely as the flower loves the bee. We live amongst the chaos, and we seek the infinite light, for what is darkness but the absence of light? If I passed you suffering, I'd offer you help. If I saw you abused, I'd stand by you. If you lay dying, I'd give my breath. I fear no human being more than I fear the loss of my Creator's approval, or to see myself diminished in my own estimation of who I should be and what I should do. For what is this life compared to the next? What is an existence without love? What is hope without faith? And what is a world without compassion? Thank you.
And finally, I'm going to hand you over to Andy Gregg, our current director, for closing remarks before.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming. It's been a hell of an evening to get here. I mean, it's been freezing outside. I think the queue's still quite big. We've still got one of our patrons, Richard Stone, phoned me a minute ago to say he's still on his way. So we hope that you'll stay after I speak very briefly and have some wine and some soft drinks and some canapes with us. So thank you very much for coming. It's my job really just to kind of wrap up the evening and thank you for coming and thank a few people for organising this event. But I just want to really respond to some of the things that have been said, because ROTA is actually a small organisation, and indeed the race equality world is a very small organisation. It's great to have some partner organisations here. We've got people here, I think, from Voice for Change England, from Runnymede, from the Race Equality Foundation, and from the Black Training Enterprise Group. If you add all those staff up together, you end up with less than 20 people, actually. So people think that there's a huge race equality sector and that we're all rushing around doing stuff. Actually, one of the problems we've got is we're rushing around trying to make you guys think there's more of us than there actually are. And that is a real problem, because we then can't control your expectations of us. And that's why we are doing a little bit of work with the funders at the moment, thinking about through how the black sector, the BME sector can be funded, not just us as the leading national race equality organisations, but particularly groups on the ground. And we hope that in the coming year that work will start to really bear fruit. So the only way that we can actually kick above our weight, as I think we do, is by working in partnership with you, and that's why it's so good to see so many different organisations represented here today. So we try and add value to, for example, the Coalition for Race Equality, the Equalities and Diversity Forum here, which was mentioned by Diana earlier on. And we also have a kind of London remit at ROTA as well, so we're doing a lot of work around the way ahead for the new way of dealing with the needs of the voluntary sector in London, the charitable sector, the civil society sector in London, in terms of its needs for small organisations to be supported by bigger ones. Some of the work that we've done has been, as mentioned this evening, but I think one of the things that really strikes me at the moment is what happened at Grenfell. In some ways, the 20 years of ROTA's existence can be seen as a voyage between the Stephen Lawrence inquiry. It's a pity that Richard Stone isn't here, because he was one of the advisors to the Macpherson inquiry, and I think he would have had something very brief to say to you if he was here. But then, 20 years later, Grenfell. And I think we think, and it's a terrible thing to say in some ways, that the Grenfell inquiry, if it was properly handled, could have the kind of effect, or even better, more effect, than even the Stephen Lawrence inquiry did, because all of the issues of race and poverty and the extraordinary discrimination that BME people have faced in that 20 years and indeed before that are there in the Grenfell issue. So we've been working with a group of people, activists, journalists and some of the local tenants to try and get the inquiry to put in its terms of reference a real inquiry into what is going on rather than just something about cladding. And that seems to me to be something that we all really need to be thinking through how we try and make that work. We may well want to contact some of you later on to try and help you add value and add impetus to our attempts to do that. Ali has made membership. You should have a membership card, a little document in your pack. It's free. You get two main things, apart from just being part of us, which is great anyway, we think. You get a quarterly newsletter which tells you what we're up to, but also tells you about what other organisations are up to as well. And we also will invite you to our events, and we try and have events once every kind of quarter at least. Indeed, we'll be launching Suman Fernando's book with London Metropolitan University in January. We have our AGM in February that we'll be inviting you to, where we've got Afua Hirsch, who's the Sky News commentator, to speak at, and we'll be thinking through how to make that a useful event too. So we will be in touch with you after this meeting, but we're more likely to be in touch with you if you manage to fill in your membership forms. So really it's up to me, I think, to kind of thank you all for coming, but thank some people in particular, because ROTA wouldn't be what it is without them. So particularly past members of staff, past directors. Elizabeth is here as well, who's another ex-director of ROTA and did a fantastic job, my predecessor actually. So I have to thank actually Dinah and Elizabeth for the tremendous organisation that I was able to inherit, and I hope I've done half as well as you guys did. So other members of staff, we've got Brian here I think, and we've got some other members of staff from right back at the beginning of ROTA 20 years ago, and a tremendous staff team now, but only 5 of them. So, you know, your expectations need to be consonant with that small number. However, we do have some wonderful volunteers as well, and we're doing a lot of work with the University of Westminster, but also SOAS and other academic institutions to try and get BME staff into volunteering as a way of them then getting into employment in the voluntary sector, in human rights and so forth. Funders, it's great to have some funders here, because you know who you are, and you'll probably be assailed by enough people here anyway who want funding, so you can remain anonymous, but it's great to see you. Volunteers on the door, I think they've probably come in now, but thank you ever so much, and it's great to see you, past and present. And partners, in particular those of you who are from small organisations, and Dinah mentioned Active Lives, Healthy Minds. We now have a 4th partner, the Network of Eritrean Women, who's joined. We managed to get an Awards for All grant so that we can add to the numbers of particularly traumatised but wonderful communities as well who are in West London, looking at how just doing some sensible activities around well-being can hopefully save huge amounts of money for the state further down the line when people don't, hopefully, refer themselves for acute mental health services to the degree that they do. Okay, and then lastly, Victor, thank you very much for your keynote speech. It was great. And also to Richard Stone, our other patron, and Meryl Hussein-Etche, who couldn't be here this evening. So to our patrons, to our staff, to our volunteers, to our partners, to you for coming on this, the coldest night of the year, can I say thank you very much, and we hope that those of you who arrived late will want possibly some copies of Victor's speech and Dinah's speech, which we will try and accommodate if we can. Please join us for a drink, even if it's cold. That'll hopefully warm you up. Thank you.